The biggest emphasis for the ritual dry fire practice is not the practice itself, but rather it's the process of going into the practice and the process you use to come out of the practice. Essentially what you're doing is you're going into fake imaginary mode, and you're doing a bunch of fake imaginary practice, and you might be doing things you normally wouldn't do under normal circumstances, and then you're leaving that way. Select the proper place and time is going to be any time without interruption. So no phone calls, no radio traffic, no television, no interruptions from your family or friends, when you can be focused and dedicated to this dry fire and in a place where you're not going to get disrupted. A colleague of mine, when I was a police officer, we were doing a bunch of live fire training together, and he was a little more motivated to get back into training because he had been a pretty good shooter at one point and kind of let things lapse a little bit. So he decided to do some emphasis on dry fire training. And he was working nights and was working in a more obscure spot, and he was going to do his dry fire training, you know, when the shift was slow. He did not have a ritualized process. And he's a very smart, very focused, very intelligent officer who did great work. But just like anybody, when they're distracted and they're focused on other things, that's when mistakes can happen, and sometimes mistakes can be catastrophic. So he was doing his dry fire training and then got a call and put all his stuff back together and went off to go do his call. And then before he got out to his car, he was canceled. So he went back into the substation and went back to go doing his dry fire training. And he pulled out his gun and he started his practice again, and he shot the TV. So there's several things going on there. One would be what you should be dry firing into should be something that's going to stop a bullet and something that you're okay with shooting. So that would be one issue. Two would be he didn't have a very specific ritualized process for going through for starting the training and stopping the training. And so he got distracted, and he's like, I'm just going to go back to what I was doing before. And because there wasn't a clear, distinct process, he went back before he was ready. And not because he's an idiot, but because he was distracted, and that's just what people do when they get distracted and their task focus switches to something else, and they try to go back to it, and they're not as attentive on what it was in the beginning. And that kind of thing happens to people all the time. So TVs get shot all the time with dry fire practice, and people can laugh and they snicker about it, and it is funny. But so like on one hand, you're watching like the action movie, you're watching Heat, and shooting all the bad guys in Heat is like super fun, right? Because you sit there dry fire at your TV, and there are reactive targets that come up. They display a threat, and then you shoot them, and so potentially you can rationalize that that's good training. However, if we're following the ritualized dry fire practice model, we need to select the proper place and time, and watching a movie is probably not the proper place and time. And then we need to go through a ritualized process for ensuring that we're only doing dry firing a certain way. And so introducing like a TV or something like that is like compromises the principles of the ritualized dry fire practice and leads down a bad path. Usually it's just something that costs you $500 to $1,000 because you got to buy a new TV. The potential for something greater certainly is there, and so I certainly wouldn't recommend that. So that's just a quick story to illustrate why a ritualized process and a good intentional target is important.